What is your number?
22.
And your color?
Green.
Okay. What do you want to run into on?
Partnership.
Okay. And what do you want to release?
Insecurity.
Okay. And she has 22, green. She wants partnership and she wants to release insecurity. There once was a little boy. And this little boy had a task to do. He was faced with climbing up this big, tall ladder up to the barn, to the loft in the barn. Now, he's only 6 or 7, so he's really kind of scared to climb up that huge ladder up to the barn. And that ladder has 22 rungs on it. He knew, because he stood there and counted every single one of them because he was so scared. He thought that maybe that would help get him over the fear, but it didn't. It just made him more nervous, knowing that there were 22 steps that he had to go to get up where he had to be. And he was supposed to be helping his dad. They were going to clean out the loft in the barn so that he could have this nice little, maybe even somebody, you know, special that would be his best friend. So he stood at this ladder and he couldn't do it the first day. He just couldn't do it. So he went on his way, he went to school, played with his friends, didn't tell them anything about being scared to go up the ladder. Not at all. So he kept doing this. He'd go back home after school every day and he'd go and he'd face that ladder and he'd try to get over his fear so he could climb up all of those 22 rungs to the barn. Now he lived in a very, very pretty area. It was green all around. There were like pine trees all around in a circle, all around their house. They had a nice little, well, it was very small. It was a pretty small home, but it was lovely. It looked similar to a log cabin, but it was a little bit more upscale from that. And the barn was very nicely kept. He had a lovely life, and his mom and dad were just really terrific people. But this thing about the ladder was really starting to bug him. So he thought, well, maybe if I take the ladder down and maybe prop up one end on a hay bale, you know, maybe then I can climb up the rungs and it'll feel better to me, you know, and I won't be so scared. I'll be used to the ladder and I will kind of have climbed it. So he went to school that day, and then the next day he came home and he was really kind of excited about this little trial of climbing up the ladder. So he put the one end on the hay bales, and he got going pretty good, and he actually made it. He made it to the hay bale, and he thought, wow, right on. So he put the ladder back up on the barn and went to school that day, and he expected that day to be able to come home and climb right up that ladder. Now, couldn't do it again. So, the next day he thought, well, that wasn't very high to put it over on that hay bale. I guess I've got to take it somewhere where it's a lot higher. So he went and he took it out to the edge of the forest, which really wasn't that far, and propped it up against a pretty small tree. Now, the first branch on the tree was about this high. So he climbs up about 5 of the rungs, and he gets up to that first branch and he thinks, oh, wow, I'm really going today. Maybe today I'll get to the top. So he goes up another couple and he starts to get scared, and he climbs back down again. Well, the next day, he's starting to make friends at school. And there's this one little guy called Johnny. And Johnny was the bravest kid in his class. So he decides to ask Johnny if he can climb up this ladder. So he brings Johnny home, and they go up to the ladder on the tree, and Johnny looks at it and he says, yeah, I can climb that thing. So Johnny gets on it and zoom right up to the top. He says, hey, I'm up here. I'm up here. And poor little Peter, that was his name. Poor little Peter looks up and he just says, I don't know how you do that. And you know, Johnny, even though he was popular, and even though he was really brave, he didn't make fun of Peter. And he decided to help him. And he said, well, I don't know how you're going to lift this thing, but I'll help you. How about if you climb up one rung and I'm right behind you and I'll climb up that rung right behind you. So they did that. And Johnny was just as faithful as he could be. So Peter would climb up a rung and Johnny would get right behind him, and sometimes that was kind of awkward because then Peter would do something awkward and kick him in the chin or something else. But Johnny was just faithful, and he kept going right up that ladder. Even when Peter got really scared after he got up about 5 rungs, he said, I can't go anymore, I just can't go, I'm so scared. Johnny would let him back off. And so they would go down and do the whole thing over the next day after school. Not only did that ladder have 22 rungs, but they practiced that for 22 days, one day after another. Each time, Johnny was going up 1 or maybe 2 rungs higher. So finally, Peter had gotten to the very top, and he was so proud. And Johnny was right behind him, and he just clapped and clapped and clapped. But all of a sudden, the ladder got unsteady because Johnny was wiggling back and forth so much, clapping for Peter. And Peter had climbed down on a limb, and Johnny clapped so hard, the ladder fell down. He fell on his butt, and the ladder fell right on top of him. And Peter's looking down at him, and he says, Johnny, are you okay? Are you okay? And he was so upset that his buddy, his friend, was laying on the ground with his big bump on his head from this big ladder that Peter actually scrambled all the way down that tree like he was born to do it, and went over and pulled the ladder off Johnny and pulled him up and said, we better go tell my mom. I know she's had something for your head. You've got a big knot on your head. So they ran home. And you know what? That little instant made those boys like this. They were fast friends from then on. And they went through life being very best friends. And sometimes it was Johnny that was afraid to do something. And sometimes it was Peter that was afraid to do something. Didn't matter which one. They would always back each other up. They would always be there for each other. And eventually, they ended up being partners in ladder-making company. You're welcome. The story of the ladder. So did it touch you in any way?
Sure.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. You're welcome. That's what I do these for. I enjoy that. I enjoy that quite a bit.